Hello and welcome to ShePack. I'm your host, Lenice Wolf, and today I'm joined by Lisa Sutherland, Senior Director of Emerging Markets at Rogers Communication. She has not only witnessed the evolution of the tech industry, but she's also played a pivotal role in shaping it. Today, she's leveraging her extensive experience to advocate for women in tech, mentor young professionals, and champion diversity and inclusion. And in today's episode, that's what we're going to talk about, embracing change and championing diversity. Lisa, welcome to ShePack, my friend. How are you?
I'm great, Lenice. I'm so excited to be here and to be sharing a bit of my story today.
Yeah, I cannot wait for others to hear about it. So now, before we jump in, you have a major milestone, my friend, coming up with Rogers Communications, where you're celebrating 30 years at the company.
I know.
That's a huge, huge accomplishment. Tell us about your early beginnings and what led you to the opportunity there.
First of all, I can't believe it's 30. So I used to tell people I started when I was 12, and now I say I started when I was 2, just to make sure that if you're doing the math. But anyways, I'm really proud of that milestone, but I'm also proud to see, how far the industry has come. When I entered the workforce, I entered with a major in sociology and French. And although I quickly worked my way into an IT position from the call center, I really found that it was about gaining the trust and respect of peers in a field where people were underrepresented like me, young and female. There weren't many of us. And that meant I had to work twice as hard sometimes to showcase the skills that I brought to the table. So building credibility was, for me, the biggest challenge. I didn't have a pure engineering background. I was the IT girl that advocated for being the voice of the customer to create better software. And that meant like breaking stereotypes, that there were different jobs that could be done in tech and not just the purest model of it. And people would often ask me, "You're the person that comes and fixes my computer if something goes wrong?" And I was like, the constant education of what did matter. No, I didn't fix your computer. I enabled our programmers to create products for our internal, external customers that were easy to use, worked well, and knew that it was an important job. But how could I communicate that in a positive way?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it sounded like a lot of the value was being with the customer and making sure you're amplifying some of their challenges and concerns and then addressing it, which is amazing. It's also amazing when I think about in college when they ask us, what do we want to be when we grow up? And I think just like you were saying, it had nothing to do with IT, but you end up navigating and finding that path, which you stuck to, which is awesome. Now, reflecting on the early days, you had alluded to some of this of being young, being a female, but what were some of the other challenges or even diving deeper into some of those challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I think growing up in IT, I found myself on a journey that really kind of opened my eyes to gender dynamics, something that I never really looked at when I was in school. It wasn't just that there were fewer women around, because there were actually quite a few women in my team. But what struck me was the environment that we created. It felt like there was this unwritten rule that only one woman could shine at a time. And there was a long line to wait in till it got to be my turn. And so there seemed to be a bit of a competition rather than fostering a warm sense of teamwork. And so at times it was quite disheartening, right? You're trying to prove yourself as a young woman, yet there was many people ahead of you and not many giving a hand back to help you up. So how was I supposed to balance my confidence and my skills, build meaningful relationships, and make sure I was still heard? So it was a struggle, and it drove me to do better. I set my heart on nurturing a culture where I could, in my own little space, where support and inclusion were the norms, where I could champion each woman instead of battling for us one seat at the table. And I tried to identify and encourage women that were unsure of themselves to believe and take a faith to try something that they themselves didn't see as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. The more women that I feel like I speak to, because all of us, unfortunately, have had some point in our careers where it's like we end up turning on each other. And it's like the complete opposite of inclusion and having more people, as you had mentioned. There's not just one seat at the table. We need to be more inclusive of having multiple diverse people at the table. And it does, in a lot of ways, it can create this toxic culture if we all only think in our mind, and even physically see that there's only one seat. So how did you feel like the gender dynamics within the tech industry really shape your experience and drive your commitment to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I think for me, and just to go back on, one seat at the table, I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, it's like when you have one or many children and you say, well, how is there enough love to go around if I have more than one, two, three? I'm the fifth child of the family. And I felt like I was included and there was enough love to go around. So for me, having that mindset of there is enough space for everybody. There isn't just a finite number. And it's about championing those initiatives that foster like that inclusion around the table, that showed me that gender dynamics didn't matter. Like it was about how do we bring more voices to the table because there's enough love to go around, whether that's work love or home love.
Yeah, I love how you utilize your children in that, or not your children, but I think going back to your upbringing and there being 5 children, I was thinking when you were saying that, I was thinking of my 3 girls. And if there was only one seat at the table, it would be like fight or flight, where I think probably my 2 would just like flight, which we would never get to experience their artistic and innovative ideas. Whereas my 3rd, she's very scrappy. So she'd be fighting the whole time and would probably win, if I'm being honest. Yeah. So as you witnessed and contributed to the evolution of the tech industry, what were some of the pivotal moments that stood out in your advocacy for women?
I think there's a few key moments that stand out to me. One milestone in particular was we had a women's ERG group at Rogers, which was already established, but it was very corporately focused. So if you were at head office, downtown, in a traditional business role, it was inclusive. And so a small group of fearless women and I stood up the extension of that resource group to help support the very specific needs of women working in the technology space that were separated geographically, but also in their interest. This platform really provided a space for women to connect, share experiences, and offer mutual support, fostering that sense of solidarity and really empowerment with each other. And then other things that really influenced me was witnessing the rise of some influential leaders that I had around me within the organization. They were a true source of inspiration and validation of the advocacy. I saw women break through barriers as the CIO in the organization, as chief digital officer, and really ascend to positions of leadership. It reaffirmed my value of female representation, and it was also underscored the potential of the transformative change that lay ahead. I was also thinking about finally, like being a mom of my 2 daughters, like I had girls, right? And that has also driven me to analyze and assess that evolution as I went through my career. Where can I make a difference for them? And how do I show up as a role model? When I can tell them anything is possible, I want to ensure that I'm doing whatever I can do to make that a true statement. So those were kind of like the 3 things. I saw the women above me. I was doing it for my daughters, and I was doing it amongst my peers.
Well, Lisa, that's like super near and dear to my heart. And that's the piece, right? I think representation matters so much. If we, I know for me personally, if I didn't see myself in a space, I thought, well, maybe I just don't belong here. And it was to our earlier point where you don't fight, you flight. And it's such a huge miss of talent of someone's voice to bring them in. I love how you were talking about these group of women's geographically that you guys were able to bring in together to continue to empower each other. So incredibly impactful. Now, in your journey, how have you seen the representation of women in tech change, and what steps do you believe are still needed?
I've definitely witnessed a positive shift in the representation of women in tech, though there's still a long road ahead. Initially, tech was predominantly, obviously, male-dominated with very few female roles around me, or leaders, but over time, increased awareness and some strategic initiatives, both corporately and personally, have slowly altered this landscape.
Yeah.
Some of the changes I observed were really around more visibility. There's an uptick in seeing women in prominent roles with tech companies, which goes back to you see it, you can replicate it, which is empowering and aspiring for female tech enthusiasts. Education outreach, programs targeting girls and young women, such as, Girls Who Code, aim to spark interest and skill development early on. A lot more opportunities for networking and mentorship. The things like what you do, Lenise, right? And the growth of women-centric tech communities provide invaluable support and guidance and just resources. Like there was not this when I was 25 years old. And so who could I go and talk to? And so that progress is amazing. There's still areas of progress that needs to happen. There's still unconditional or unconscious bias, not unconditional, unconscious bias. This, we need to foster an inclusive culture that actively works against the stereotypes and the unconscious biases that we don't even realize that are happening every day. I think COVID also brought about the flexible work environments that empowered more women in a way, but also hindered them in a way because they felt like they had to do it all.
Yeah.
But the flexible work environments to accommodate everybody's different stages of life and responsibilities, they have to be adaptive, or else we're not going to get the full breadth of opportunities from everybody that's available in the workforce.
Yeah, it's still crazy to me that from an unconscious bias perspective, there are those biases where it's either one, if they have children, they won't be able to do as much. We won't be able to get them into meetings or, add workload. But then even on the opposite side, they don't have children. They can do even more because they don't have a life. And it's like, whether we realize it or not, there is that unconscious bias. That's just like one of many. And there's so much work that still needs to be done. Now, I'm going to pivot slightly and go into your personal life, especially about your mother. So how has her journey as what I'll call a traditional woman influenced your career path and advocacy work?
Yeah. So my mom was the epitome, I think, of the traditional woman. She didn't work outside the home while my siblings and I were growing up. She looked after all of us and my dad. My dad was probably like the sixth child. With her limited knowledge of what was really happening in the workforce, there was no direction on, what I should go and take in university or any of that. So she was really the caregiver. But I observed the challenges she faced as really societal expectations and the limitations placed upon her due to her gender, right? And her generation, really. And despite these obstacles, she in her own way demonstrated resilience and commitment to her family and community. Her experiences instilled in me a deep sense of empathy and a passion for advocating for gender equality and women's empowerment. I knew I didn't ever want to be in a relationship where I was not an equal in any way, and that means personal or professional. I wanted to make sure that I was always an equal, even though I didn't see it. I saw where I wanted to be different and better than her. And I also wanted her to be proud of me for things that I was good at and how I could influence her to do better for herself. And so the gender dynamics between my parents served as a driving force behind my decision to be a little bit disruptive. My mom would say I was the one who always pushed the boundaries, the ones that was always pushing my dad to open his eyes to what was actually happening. And I was always been determined to use my voice as a way to amplify voices of others, particularly those that couldn't see their own potential, like my mom, and empower women to realize, they do have a bigger potential than what they can see right in front of them. She also, I would say, really shaped how I approach leadership, emphasizing the importance of empathy and vulnerability, because those are the things that she brought in spades. And I saw it not as a weakness, but as an emotion, to show my emotion was a strength. And it made it okay for others to trust me and to be themselves around me too. So this created space for everybody to feel valued and they could bring their full self to me as a leader.
Yeah, it's funny. I always I feel like mothers are so powerful. And I do think, to your earlier point, generational wise, it was typical, I feel like, for women to be more at home and cater to husbands and, all that jazz. And it's kind of refreshing to see now how that role is starting to change. And you hear more about partnerships and men and women supporting each other and supporting, things that are important in their lives. Now, offline, you were talking with me about, when your father had passed. And, if we dig into that a bit more, after his passing, how did witnessing your mother's growth and independence further inspire efforts in empowering women for you?
Yeah. So when my dad passed away, it was about 18 years ago. My mom was in her 60s. And there were several moments where I looked at my mom and I would see her spinning on how to navigate those moments of independence, right? From the decisions where she could solely make on her own without consultation or without financial guilt. Buying a condo, she always wanted deciding what to cook for herself for the first time, just for her, or having friends over anytime she wanted. And as much as she had said to me over the years that I could do whatever I put my mind to, I wanted to tell her, and sometimes I did, slowly and sometimes forcefully, that she could also do whatever that she wanted to do, and that there was no limitations to her learning and her growth. I wanted to inspire her as much as she had influenced me with her love and support. Mm-hmm. And so her journey served as a powerful reminder of it's never too late. She navigated, things from tech usage, from getting connected to the internet for the first time, to automated banking, to using Zoom. I saw the potential in every woman through my mom, because if my mom could do it, then anybody could do it. And seeing her take control of her own destiny, pursue her passions, and overcome these obstacles, even though she still calls me for tech support, a lot of the time, it left a real mark on me how much she's grown over the last, 18 years. And it's reinforced my belief in the importance of empowering women to realize their full potential and autonomy, regardless of their circumstances. It was like this moment of, my mom swims. She likes to swim every day in the pool. And so I always use this analogy. She taught me it's okay to help people jump into the deep end of the pool as long as I'm there to support them if they need a hand. But sometimes if you throw somebody in the deep end of the pool, they can swim themselves and get to safety on their own, right? So she's really grown, and I hope that I've inspired her to grow as much as she has inspired me.
I was just going to say, what was inspiring in all that is knowing how much she had empowered you as a young girl. And then as, it's kind of like these roles ended up switching and you were empowering her. But even then, it's like it still comes kind of full circle, because even now, like seeing her and how she's transformed in these past couple of years, it's once again inspiring yourself. So it's like this like ongoing wheel. And I can only imagine your two daughters are watching this and being part of that growth for the both of you.
I hope so. I mean, sometimes it's that full circle love fest, the family love fest. And I catch it sometimes in how they react with her versus how they react with me. And they push her as well to be, more independent. Right. So I'm loving that there's this strong generational of female empowerment with each other.
Totally. Yeah. Well, now, and you spoke, so you have two young girls, and integrating a demanding career, a personal life is just a universal challenge. What insights can you share about just managing this integration, especially as a mother?
Yeah. So my girls aren't that young anymore, but it doesn't matter. And I also love and hate this question, because in order to, achieve balance, the scales really have to tip one way or another before you achieve balance. So for me, it's about prioritizing when you're going to be all in at work or all in at home. And no, it's going to change over time and at different stages of your life and career. And so for me, early on, when I realized, wow, this mom thing is a real deal. Like this is the most important thing to me. I set boundaries pretty early on in my career to say, as parents, here's the expectation that I have to leave by a certain time. I have to come at a certain time. And the two little ones were my priority. But I also set the same expectations with my family. Working in technology, there was a lot of times where you had to come in on a Sunday morning, overnight deployments. And so that was mom's time where she had to go into work, which was not always fun because that means I had to miss a Saturday night, something fun, but it was also expectations on both sides. It was about prioritizing things at home as well. We would always prioritize dinner together on weekdays. That was like a must for us. And that ensured like no phones, no tech at the table. And we had 1 hour of the day to really catch up with one another and have a home base for discussion. The kids would laugh that it's family meeting time because it's dinner time, but they were, it was a routine that really set some boundaries for us as well. And we asked for help, right? Back to my mom being the independent woman she was, there was many calls that I still had to make to my mom. Somebody was sick or I had to go on work travel. So, it takes a village to help support, to help that balance in times where you can't be in one place or another. And then always being present, like wherever you are, because you're no good to anybody if your mind's somewhere else. So choosing when you make those priorities to be either with your family and friends or with work and being all in on that. And like I said before, balance is not static and it may look different at different stages of your life and career. I woke up this year and my kids are now 16 and 20. And I said, my 20-year-old's at university and my 16-year-old has a very busy life. And I said, what's in it for me now? Like, what am I doing for myself? And so those routines and priorities start to change. And so the balance becomes more like, for me, not with the kids, right? It's making sure I'm not turning all my spare time into workaholic time. And what am I choosing for myself? And then giving yourself some grace, right? You don't always get it right. You screw up a lot. I almost said the F word, but you always screw up a lot. And I kind of embrace the imperfection. And there's guilt, right? There's mom guilt sometimes, guilt when you're not at home or guilt when you're at work. But you have to embrace that. Learn from your mistakes. Remember you're doing the best you can, right? And that's something else you want your kids to see. That there isn't perfection, that there is times where mom's struggling, but that they can be resilient amongst those times.
Yeah, it's one of those things that resonates so much for me because you have these societal pressures that are surrounding you. And it's so hard. It can be really hard to give yourself grace because you're putting all that pressure of, I need to be everything to everyone. But as you pointed out, it's giving yourself that time period. And I think it's a best practice at dinner time. That's the best time where we get to show up and be present with my girls to not just say like, how's your day? I mean, we really talk about what were your challenges? What was your favorite part of the day? And it's my favorite part. And it's like you said, it's like an hour, but that hour means everything to my girls to where now my 3-year-old, she tries to mutter out like, what's your favorite part? And we all know, okay, time to get into that routine. The other thing, and I just want to call it out because I think it's so important to talk about just kind of the different seasons that you're in and taking the time for self-care. I think making sure first and foremost that you're not forgetting about that. Because again, it's so easy to put everybody first.
100%. And that self-care doesn't, always mean manis and pedis and facials and things like that. Totally. It means time to actually decide what you want to do with your life outside of work, right? That reflection time has been so critical to me, especially in the last 6 months to a year. It gives me the space to decide what's my next step going to be in life. So give yourself that time for sure.
Yeah. I also think all of that too, it helps us to just show up better. So then when we are at work, we can share our voices, our expertise, our skill sets, because we're coming in as mostly our full self. So, if we start to dive into diversity and inclusion initiatives, can you share an instance where you've witnessed the impact of inclusive environments that are empowering women?
Yeah. And for me, inclusive environments is noticeable when things are done kind of consistently happens on a day-to-day, small choices we make every day. One of the most favorite things that I've talked about before and that I try to reiterate is like naming and echoing in a room, right? A colleague has a point of view or a statement, and by you as an ally reinforcing another woman's idea in a meeting by saying, Jill made this statement and I concur. It really builds empowerment and confidence to keep going, right? We is another powerful word. And, there are times in my career when I mentor other women, I'm like, you should always talk about I and not use we, especially when you're advocating for yourself. But to create an inclusive environment, it's about we. What did we do to make something happen? And celebrating wins publicly is another way that you drive inclusivity, right? That celebration of highlighting others' accomplishments really empowers that. It's like it sparks that payback, right? When you give a compliment, then it inspires somebody else to give the compliment or that feedback for celebrating wins. And then sponsorship also drives inclusivity. So being really mindful and picking people that you want to sponsor that may not always be chosen because they're not the extrovert and the one that shines big with the big projects. Picking those quiet leaders in their own way and sponsoring them really helps create an inclusive environment for me.
Yeah. No, it's something that I don't think I've ever thought of. I know I've done, but even hearing the impact of inclusivity when you're in a group setting and when you hear your name brought up and a point that someone made to me always made me feel confident that somebody heard me. And they also agreed, because a lot of the time it takes a lot of courage to go and share your ideas because you don't know if they might be shot down, but to hear somebody else support you and be that advocate means the world. Now, you talked about sponsoring others and picking quiet leaders as well as highlighting wins. What are other ways that we can ensure diverse voices are heard and valued in your team?
Lead by example, right? So that's the biggest thing for me. You can't ask people to do something that you're not doing yourselves. So when you see something, say something. Speak up on observed biases in the workplace. I heard a story last week about somebody being in a tech conference and one of the men in the room called the girl darling or pumpkin or something not, a microaggression. And I thought, had I been there, I would have said, her name is Lenice, right? And so when you see those small microaggressions, I think you need to speak up, right? To inspire people to do the same. These are courageous conversations in some circumstances, but they're so necessary. And seek the personal feedback on how you're showing up with your peers. Are you really truly creating an environment that's welcoming and inclusive? And if you're not, I would want to be aware of it. Are there things that I'm doing that are dismissive, that aren't making people feel like they're part of the team? That will help educate and allow you to connect with others to share ideas in your own space when you can make changes in your own workplace yourself.
It's interesting when you were saying kind of the naming it. I thought of my dad, who loves my girls. And again, I got a full on girl gang and they love their grandfather. But I remember it took me back to actually one of my girls. It was at her softball game and she was in the outfield and she was just, kind of looking around, not paying attention. And my husband was getting upset. Oh, well, she's not paying attention again. And my dad goes, oh, it's because she's a girl. And I was like, hold on, pump the brakes. It's not because she's a girl. It's because the ball hasn't been going out there and she's bored and she isn't paying attention, which it's important that she does because the ball could go out there. Don't just label her a girl. And he's like, oh, well, he didn't mean anything about it. But it goes back to what you were saying about this unconscious bias. And we have to be very aware. It's not a girl thing, because there's plenty of girls who pay a lot of attention and who are really badass, actually. Yeah. So, it made me think of that.
Well, and the fact that, I've seen a lot of little boys playing soccer and baseball in the field, and they're out picking daisies out there. So it's not a girl thing. So to valid. Your dad, respectfully, it was she was waiting to be excellent, and she just didn't get the chance.
Yeah, exactly. To your point though, I think being an advocate and calling out that so that it removes the unconscious bias and it really just nips it in the butt. Now, what advice would you give to young professionals, especially women who aspire to leadership roles in tech or any other industry?
I think it's so hard. I always find it hard to give advice, and it sounds really weird. I like to coach people into coming up with their own solutions. But if I had to give something to anybody, it's really about believing in yourself, right? The only person that can really believe in you more is you. Like, you are the one. You have to have the confidence in your abilities and believe that you have what it takes to succeed. I did this exercise a long time ago at work where we were asked, what are you better at than anybody else in the entire world? And so everybody, all the women kind of chuckled and went, oh, I'm not really good at anything. And all the men were like, this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm better at than anybody else in the entire world. And so for me, it's like taking that thing that that you're good at. You pretty much know you're good at, and believing in that and stating it and saying it. If you recognize your strengths, skills, and unique talents, don't be afraid to showcase them. Just say it. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing I would give as advice is try to set some clear goals, right? Define what your aspirations are. You might not take a straight line to get there, but at least you have something that's a goal that's for the future, and you can forge your own path on how to get there. And it might change, but taking some small steps to get to an initial goal is super important. And then seek out mentorship. I really, really believe in mentors as role models that can help guide and support and give you invaluable insights from their own experiences. Mm-hmm. And continue to learn and grow. Like, if you're not learning in your role, then switch your role. Even if it's even if you hate what you're doing, I think those are some of your best learning experiences, because you learn what you don't like, and then you start to learn what you do like. So it really shapes that goal setting for yourself too.
Yeah. And it seems like so many, especially young professionals, women, they're looking for mentorship. Where would you recommend to start looking to find somebody that could support you and be an advocate for you?
I think you look around your own workplace and seek out those people that you respect in your workplace. And it doesn't always have to be a woman to woman in terms of mentorship. Mm-hmm. It can be those that you view as allies, that you might say, would you mind mentoring me? I mean, a lot of companies have resource groups that have, official mentoring, but for me, it's more organic, right? It's who were you in a meeting with that you heard speak that resonated with you? Who did you see make a post on social media that may have resonated with you? And be brave and reach out. That's how we kind of met, right? And so I want to make sure that people feel like there has to be a connection for mentorship too, right? It doesn't work if there's no effort from the mentee to the mentor, and there's chemistry. The chemistry has to be there in order to make it work. But don't be afraid to pick up that phone and say, would you mind having a coffee with me? And use all the available channels that you have. Like I said, you have so many education points through social, through your work environment, through friends, through networking, through all these amazing groups for women out there, including, ShePAC. Reach out and take a chance.
Yeah, people would be so surprised too that when you ask for help and at least the direction of what you want help with, there's so many people out there that are willing to step in, that are willing to help. And you'd be surprised. Not a lot of people ask for help.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I love also what you had said about the organic side of it and just the connection, because I think those have been some of the relationships and mentors that I've had for almost like 15 plus years that I can think of, where we just had that connection. And it's okay. Like there's some people you may meet once or twice and you don't have a good connection, but that's okay. There's still something to be learned about it. So my last question for you, my friend, is in a world full of possibilities, what mark do you dream of leaving as a trailblazer for future generations of empowered women?
Wow, that's a big question, right? So trailblazers, I think for me, it's about inspiring other women back to being themselves. Like I said, don't ever be afraid to be your authentic self and never giving up. If somebody says no to you, try again. If that's what you're really passionate about, keep going and aim high. Don't ever set your expectations low, right? Because our male counterparts don't do that. So aim high, break down barriers, right? Make sure that every woman out there knows that every barrier that was put in front of the women before them took, one or two or five or 10,000 kicks to break it down, but it eventually happened. And continue to promote fairness in everything you do. It's not about women first. It's about women being equitable in this. So I want to make sure that, you lock arms with your allies, your organization, or across the world. So my goal is really to encourage women to embrace who they are, follow their passions, and overcome any challenges in their own way. I want to continue to lead by example, showing that women can achieve anything they set their minds to. And in the end, I hope that I leave a legacy that empowers women to be confident, resilient, and successful in whatever they choose to pursue. And it's really about making sure every girl out there knows she's got what it takes to change the world.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was beautifully said. And, thank you so much, Lisa, for being part of the She Pack, for taking the time. There were so many great nuggets, again, that we had discussed of how much representation matters, how much, inclusivity and not having an unconscious bias, because there's more than one seat at the table. And I think my biggest takeaway that I just continue to love is making sure to say other people's names and being an advocate for them. So thank you so much for spending your time with me and our audience today. And as we wrap up today's episode, let's remember that in supporting one another, we amplify our strengths and we break down barriers. So go out there, champion for your dreams, empower your peers, and continue to shape a future where every woman realizes her true potential. Until next time, see ya.